States has imposed an ironclad blockade that grows more powerful by the day. From the Gulf of Oman to the open oceans, our Navy is enforcing this blockade without hesitation or apology.
At 2:13, 41 miles west of Tehran, 28 operators from Delta and 2 Green Beret detachments were staring at a buried fortress cut into the rock beyond Karaj, with 116 defenders inside, one objective on the clock, and 74 minutes to finish it before the window closed. They had come for the IRGC commander-in-chief, a man tied to movements from Qom to Kermanshah, and for whatever he kept below the concrete and steel no satellite could fully read. They thought it couldn't be taken. They were wrong. The compound was known inside Joint Task Group Black Lantern as Site Raven, but the name was misleading. This wasn't a bunker, it was a command spine. From that ridge, encrypted traffic had been routed through relay nodes near Ray, road convoys had been redirected toward Hamadan, and fuel, money, and missile components had vanished into the Zagros under names that existed only in Directorate 9 paperwork. What they didn't know was why the traffic volume doubled every 6 nights, why 4 hardened transport cases disappeared from the loading manifests, or why the internal personnel count was off by 17. The problem wasn't the mountain. The problem was what the mountain was hiding. Raven Cell first found the pattern in a damaged logistics mirror lifted months earlier from a burned safe house outside Shahryar, then matched it to 3 separate blackout drills that all ended at exactly 3:30. That wasn't the real objective. The real target was deeper, and every analyst who looked at the numbers came back with the same conclusion. Somebody had built a second mission inside the first one. By 2:17, the 2 timers were already running against each other. The first was the 74-minute mission window. The second was worse. A wipe sequence expected to begin 22 minutes after the first internal breach, one that could melt drives, flood tunnels with suppressant foam, and turn every useful record into sludge before dawn ever touched the Albors. Site Raven's defenders believed geography made them untouchable. North, broken ridgelines and switchback roads. South, exposed approaches with overlapping sightlines. Underground, 3 known levels, 2 vehicle shafts, 1 freight elevator, and a doctrine built on the certainty that no foreign force would risk time on the ground this close to Tehran. That was the mistake. They weren't there for the gates. They were there for the silence behind the gates. While Delta moved toward the outer access structures, Green Berets were already watching the road lattice that tied the site to Karaj and the old military corridors feeding east. At the same time, Raven Cell stayed buried in signal intercepts, waiting for the single discrepancy that would prove the commander was physically present and not just another ghost routed through decoy traffic. Underground, nobody inside Site Raven yet understood the night had already started collapsing around them. At 2:24, external power dipped for 11 seconds. Not enough to trigger panic, enough to trigger habit. Doors cycled, cameras reset, backup relays took the load, and a single elevator made an unscheduled stop between level 2 and level 3 before dropping back into the shaft. What they didn't know was that one elevator stop mattered more than the entire outer wall. That was the first sign the facility was moving something alive or something priceless. At 2:31, the first breach warning flashed inside the security hub and the wipe timer started. 22 minutes. No one outside said it twice. They didn't have to. This wasn't a raid. It was an erasure. While one element forced movement toward the upper corridors, another pushed the defenders into reacting to the wrong threat, and somewhere between those 2 collisions, the real contest began, not over ground, but over minutes. At 2:36, the internal roster updated again. It still didn't match. Type yes if you would have kept moving after the numbers stopped making sense. By 2:44, resistance hardened near the command mezzanine, exactly where the blueprints said it would. That was almost comforting, almost. Because the man waiting in room 6 was not the commander. He was the right height, the right age, and he died with the right insignia on his chest. But the ears were wrong. The left hand carried an old fracture missing from the medical file, and the ring on his finger had no abrasion marks beneath it. Not captured, not reclaimed, gone. The commander had never been in room 6. What they didn't know was that the decoy had been moved into place only 9 minutes earlier after the elevator stop nobody could explain. At the same time, south of the main shaft, a Green Beret team tracking outbound movement found something worse than fleeing guards. They found 4 empty shock-proof cases in a service tunnel no blueprint mentioned, still cold from server transfer, each tagged with the same burn code tied to the blackout drills. And the problem wasn't the decoy. The problem was the facility was larger than expected. There was a 4th level. There had always been a 4th level. That was the mistake. The original plan had been built around 3 buried floors, 116 defenders, and 74 minutes. Now the count was broken, the commander was missing, the archive was moving, and the wipe timer had less than 11 minutes left. If you want to see what they found below the official war floor plan, hit like right now. At 2:51, the first suppressant dump hit the upper server room, white vapor rolled through the racks, drives began to cook, and for 40 seconds it looked like the mission was about to turn into a body count with no answers. Then Raven Cell caught the reroute, not to escape corridors, to cooling lines. That wasn't the real objective. The real target was deeper, hidden behind the systems designed to destroy it. While one element held the narrowing corridor above, another followed the cooling trunk past false maintenance panels and concrete poured over older blast doors. At the same time, outside the ridge, engines were beginning to turn over at a support barracks 18 miles away. The secondary clock had changed shape. Even if the wipe failed, reinforcements would not. At 2:57, they broke into the chamber below level 4. It was not a vault in the cinematic sense. No gold, no flags, no grand map wall, just cold air, humming racks, 2 mirrored servers inside a sealed cage, and a red binder chained to a desk stamped with transport schedules, continuity authorities, and handwritten signatures tying front companies in Quam, Ray, and Hamadan to shipments routed through civilian contractors no one had publicly named. They weren't there for the man. They were there for the machine behind the man. And then they found him, not in a throne room, not behind a blast curtain, halfway between the archive cage and a narrow evacuation shaft, wearing a plain field jacket over rank he no longer needed to display, flanked by 6 internal guards whose insignia did not match the outer garrison. Directorate 9. That was why the count had been off by 17. That was why the decoy had been placed upstairs. That was why the 4 missing cases had vanished from the manifests. 2 servers, 1 ledger vault, 1 biometric key nest. Comment deep if you think the commander was never the only target. At 3:04, the chamber became the center of the entire night. Above ground, defenders were still trying to hold corridors that no longer mattered. Outside, vehicles were committing to the mountain roads. Underground, the archive cage came open 14 seconds before the wipe cascade reached the lower line, and inside the red binder were call signs, transit windows, shell firms, and a 63-page continuity log describing how command would fragment and reassemble if Tehran lost contact for 48 hours. What they didn't know was that the ledger mattered even more than the man standing next to it. The commander tried to move for the evacuation shaft. He didn't make it. No speech, no bargain, no theatrical end. 1 violent second, 1 failed rush through a narrowing gap, and the center of the network was finished, where the concrete turned wet with condensation and the warning lights shifted from amber to red. By 3:11, the mirrored servers were stripped of their drives. By 3:17, the last intact pages were bagged. By 3:29, the lower chamber was dark, not captured, not reclaimed, gone. While the exfil began, controlled charges buried the hidden shaft and the false maintenance corridor behind it, sealing the 4th level into the mountain like it had never existed. At the same time, upper defenders were still sending reports to command nodes that had already stopped answering. Outside, smoke drifted low over the ridge as the first reinforcement vehicles reached empty kill boxes, late to the wrong fight. This wasn't a victory lap, it was a denial. By 03:44, the force was off the objective. On paper, Tehran would call it sabotage, maybe an industrial blast, maybe an internal security failure no foreign power could prove. But paper was the one thing that no longer belonged to them. Share this because most people still think the strike ended at the blast doors. In the hours that followed, roads from Karaj to Qom locked down, checkpoints appeared outside Ray, and units in Hamadan received contradictory orders from command channels that no longer matched voice authentication already pulled from the lower chamber. That was the strategic fracture, not the explosion, not the smoke, the silence. What they miscalculated was simple. They built a fortress to stop an assault, but the assault was never the real danger. The real danger was time. And time turned against them the second the decoy was exposed, the fourth level was found, and the red binder came out of the cage. Final count: 2 friendly wounded, 0 killed, 31 defenders and internal guards lost, 67 minutes on the ground, 1 commander removed, 2 mirrored servers stripped, 63 pages recovered, 3 regional command circuits compromised, and an estimated $84 million in infrastructure and denial damage before the first public statement was even drafted. If you think the archive mattered more than the takedown, comment Ledger below. Subscribe if you want the full breakdown of what the continuity log revealed after dawn.